Melissa Borchers. I have been teaching for 14 years. I am secondary education English and reading. I've done all English, all reading, intensive reading, not so intensive, super intensive, whoa intensive. I need Jesus intensive, and then to the other spectrum, which is AP. So that's always fun. When you have those back to back, that's a good day because you're like, wow, college level, whoa, I don't know even, let's put a sentence together. So I'm going to try to do the best I can to kind of give you a broad idea of some ways to really hit some reading. Digest, because they cover everything from science to technology to reading to social studies. So I pull a lot of things from there and then try to connect it. But be a collector of things from your subject area, because the textbook is sometimes 10 and 15 years old. You know, we got to work with what we've got, and we can't expect it to always be fresh and up to date. So I definitely want to kind of throw that out there. But again, think of a piece, especially after today, that you can use in your classroom and just spend some time on it, because that's ultimately what we're going to focus on, is how to take one piece of reading. And you may not be able to do it, you know, all year long, but if you pull one or two pieces and begin to work with your kids, start showing them how to think deeply, that's what's missing when they get to college. That's where the disconnect is. So before we do that, because it's like, okay, well, this sounds good, but where do I go from there? All right, locate this sheet of paper. It's an instructional purpose, because I'm very visual. So I'm going to kind of show you what that's going to look like. I don't know if I'm close enough here. I use this even to this day, and I've been teaching for 14 years, and I still go back and look at this, especially working here at a charter school. You never know what you're going to be teaching. Sometimes you're teaching 3 or 4 different preps. So a lot of times I have to go back and really think about this. So one of the things I've done is I've gone ahead and I've broken down the article that we're going to look at today. And this is very important. I want to stress to you, this first section here is really start to think about what your kids need to know before they read. Because oftentimes we give them an article and unfortunately it's a filler. You know, we're just trying to get some papers graded or whatever. But I want us to kind of rethink that. So I've made a list of who or what they need to know before they start reading. This is also a good place to list those vocabulary words, especially like the Tier 1, Tier 2 vocabulary words and so forth. The next thing is, I always force myself to say, okay, what 2 places are they going to have difficulty with? Because I'm an expert in this area, but they're not. And one of the things I know is because of the names in this article, they're not familiar, so I know I've got to really, they're not, you know, names that they hear every day. They're Bosnian names that I really need to work on that. Also, they use a flashback method when they're writing. So it's present day, and then they flash back to the past. The next couple of questions are going to ask you, what will I model to help students negotiate the difficult parts? This is where Kristavani was saying, this is how you teach reading. How do you take in information? Because your kids need to see it. They need to see how a math teacher takes in information, science teacher, social studies teacher, because I'm not the end-all be-all. What works for me may work better in a science classroom seeing it from a science person, because maybe they're more science-minded. So I think it's really important that we think about reading as you showing your kids how you learn. So for this particular activity, I'm going to use sticky notes and I'm going to annotate and highlight. Again, I'm very visual. It works for me. If it doesn't work for you, toss it. The other one is the critical reading checklist. I can't take credit for this. I've got all the footnotes on here. I love this one because I feel like they dive even deeper into the questioning method. And if you look, it does have a place on the second page. It really gets into, for science people or even for math people, they talk about methodology. They talk about graphs and charts. So your kids can even go through and evaluate, say for example, you give them 2 different versions of the quadratic equation and how to solve it. They can go through and evaluate, ooh, this one's better than this one, and why, kind of walks them through. Actually, my students have a copy of this that they keep in their folders, and we use it all the time. So there's this, by the end of the year, it's written on, because I'm like, star it. Oh, we used stars last time, circle it, I don't know. So it's all colorful by the time we're done. And I usually go through and I'll pick about 4 or 5 questions I want them to focus on. So I've boxed them in over here on the side so you can see where my angle is for this particular article we're going to look at. I'm asking, does the author write from an insider or outsider's perspective? How does it affect what's included or excluded? Do you agree with what the author's saying? Oh, we've never asked them that before. Are the points made by the author supported by evidence? Is the evidence referenced? Is it recent? And does the writer present opinion as fact? I think this one's really important because so many times they do. And what I love about it is they're no longer just reading it, they're actually questioning it. So that's what we want to move our students to, because too often they receive a text or the textbook and they think that this is it, this is the law, this has got to be it. But I want them to question it. Not only is it a great story, and there's a lot to be learned from this, but there's more to it, because if anything's written by a human, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be ideas and bias in there. So it gets them sort of thinking about it. We did everything we said we were going to do. We cited textual evidence. We can support it. We've analyzed it. We've made inferences. We've looked at details. We've summarized. There's a myriad of things that we could have done. I know we're kind of rushing because I want to get lunch in you so you don't throw stuff at me. So I just wanted to point out to you that here we have literally built an entire lesson plan just off of these 5 or 6 words, what we've been able to do with this. Now think if you could just do this with 1 or 2 items in your classroom. I'm not asking you to do it every single day, but pick 1 or 2 concepts that your kids can really, really, really dig into. Before we go any further, I do want to point out, because you're like, why do I have this science paper in here? I gave you this one. Cellular respiration. My biology teacher's been bugging me. He's like, you can't teach cellular respiration. So I was like, challenge accepted. And I did it with math too, and I apologize, I didn't bring my quadratic equation one for you. But what I did was I found on RefSeek, believe it or not, a cellular respiration lab that kids can do. It's fairly easy. It just involves balloons and active dry yeast, and it blows up the balloon. And then I found a website that does an online lab for cellular respiration. And it's a totally different lab. So now kids can do a hands-on lab, and they can do a virtual lab, and then using their critical thinking questions, they can go back through and compare and contrast them. You would not believe how much your kids can learn from just being able to compare and contrast, because they've got to dig deeply. They've got to look a little deeper.